Hello, great to see you all. I'm going to do a little bit of a musical introduction as you all jump on. This is not what the show's about yet. It's just the piece that I'm practicing. So as you all come in, here's a little bit of a musical intro. Okay, so as you all know, I'm going to do a little countdown just to say hello to make sure that we're all here together. So I'll do a shorter countdown than usual since you're all already here. And then we'll start with the hardest part, whether it applies to cello or business or exercise or your home life. See you in just a few moments. It won't be the whole 30 seconds. It'll just be Hello, wonderful people. I told you it would just be a fraction of the time to make sure that we have most of the time to play with this. Okay. The hardest part. I'm going to show you what is the hardest part for me with cello. Just to remind everyone, I'm on month 4 of cello, learning the cello. I'll show you what the hardest part is, and then I'll tell you how we can apply this to business and to exercise. And just for context, we're executive coaches, I and my colleagues, and we often, when we start working with a leader, we ask them, what is it you want to work on, of course, and how are you doing on that thing? So let me give you an example. We're working with a leader and we'll say, what do you want to work on? And they might say something like, I want to have better executive presence, or I want to be more inclusive in terms of my team, even in individual meetings or team meetings. And then we ask them, how are you doing on this today? On a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is best. And they'll self-rate. And they'll say, I'm about a 4 on being let's say on being a strategic leader. I think about it sometimes, but I don't really give myself enough time during the week. I'd really like to move that to a 7 or 8, if not higher. And that's our initial rating. And I want to point out this conundrum to you. Sometimes, let's say someone starts at a 4. Sometimes by the time they've done their coaching with us, say 4 months of coaching or 6 months of coaching, we ask them, where are you now on being a strategic leader? And they might say, okay, let's say I'm their coach, Senia, I've done so many experiments with you. I have so many things in my head in terms of things that I've tried and things that have worked and some that haven't in terms of being a strategic leader, that when you ask me now, I think I'm only at a 5 out of 10 because that scale is so much bigger. Those values, 6 to 10, there's so much more there. I didn't even know those things were there. So we, as coaches, sometimes we even have someone rate themselves at a 5 or 6 on what they are, and at the end of the engagement, rate themselves at a 4 or 3. That's fine. Certainly, it could be that they've gotten worse in what they want to work on, but it could also be that the scope of what they see is so much more. That brings us back to the cello. As you know, I've been studying for about 4 months, and here is what I found to be the hardest part. So I love the cello. I love the sound it makes. I love playing around with it. I know you can't see the bottom right now, but even just a beautiful sound, right? It's so beautiful. And I love even the pieces that I'm working on. They're not super complex yet, but they're getting there. So I'm going to show you the hardest part. And the problem is, I think this is me going from initially thinking, oh, I'm maybe a 2 at cello, to now thinking maybe I'm a 1.5 or a 1. It turns out that you really can't learn the cello or maybe any musical instrument without going a little deeper, without not just learning notes and how to hold the bow, but with also learning about the music itself. So here is what is the hardest part for me. When you play, this is the A string, the highest string on the cello. That's an A string. This is an A string with finger 1. Here's the problem, and here's what's really hard for me. If I play a little bit off, that I hear. But if I play just a little bit off, I can't tell that that's not the same. And I need to start to learn that. So I'll give you an example. I'm playing. If I'm looking at music over here, I can't be looking at my fingers and matching them to the sticker dots, the beginner sticker dots that formal cello players do not have. So the hardest part is as I learn to make music, I'm going to need to open A string. I'm going to need to put my finger down on the 1, and I'm not looking at it right now in the image. I know that's a little off, but where is it? So now I am looking at the image. Is it above the dot? Is it below the dot? So I need to adjust while I'm playing. All right, that's more like it. It's a little off. That's more on. So, and I'll show you this. I'll do it 2 times with my eyes closed, and we'll see. It's a little bit of an experiment for myself. How well can I adjust? So here we go. I know that's off, but let me see if I can find the right one. I think it's here. No, see, I'm still below. So I tried one that was above, I adjusted, and I went to below. Let me try one that's below and see if I can adjust. And then we'll go on to what this experiment means. So let's try if I can adjust, again, with eyes closed. I know I'm below, but how far below am I? I think I'm close now, am I? No, see, I'm just a little bit above. This is why it's the hardest part for me. Do you see this? I'm just a little bit above the sticker. And a Yo-Yo Ma, or the woman that I follow, Julie Sevilla Frez, she would not do that. She would know where that is without the sticker. That's the hardest part. And the hardest part of that being the hardest part, first of all, that it's so hard for me to actually, and I do practice that, and I practice that with my eyes closed. But in addition to practicing it with my eyes closed, it's a little bit not what I signed up for with cello. I signed up for hearing the beautiful music, learning notes and making beautiful music. But it's training my ear. It's a little bit of music theory, perhaps. It's just so much more complex than what I thought was going to happen. And I'm up for it. I practice this. I try to make it. But what I'm saying is the hardest part is that the specific thing is hard. It's also beyond the expectations that I had. And I'm okay with that. So let me show you 2 ways that this applies. The hardest part applies to business and applies to exercise. I tend to like to use those 2 examples because most of us have those in our lives. Okay, here's what we're doing. Business. What is the hardest part for you in business? Let me give you an example. I wrote one down so we could run through it. Suppose that you are working on being a more emotionally intelligent leader. Thank you so much, by the way. You're so kind. A Facebook person said, I'm working on being a coach, leader, and student of cello. Thank you. That's really kind. Suppose you're working on being a more emotionally intelligent leader. The basics, so a little bit like the basics of notes and bow hold for me, the basics of being an emotionally intelligent leader are to notice what's going on and to help people when things are not going so well, when you sense that something's not going so well. The ninja level of being an emotionally intelligent leader is that you're aware before people even need you to be aware. So if you're in a meeting and you're noticing how people are and what they're like, even before the tension rises. For example, you might notice that somebody hasn't spoken at all. And in that case, sort of a second level ninja, it might not necessarily be the right choice to call on that person, because sometimes some people don't want to be called on, but they might be open to typing comments into a chat, for example. Now, I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking and choosing details, but if you have set out for yourself, I want to be an emotionally intelligent leader, at some point you're going to get to those nuances of noticing things in the environment, even before the tension builds or before they really need to be noticed. Let's do another example. One more business example. Suppose you want to be a better presenter. We have this a lot with people we coach. I am constantly working on being a better presenter, whether for you all or when I'm working with a group and it's an interactive workshop. Becoming a better presenter. First steps are around telling stories. You see, I use myself as a guinea pig of stories, myself with what I'm working on with cello. First step is telling stories, making the presentation so that people can follow along with the story. That's the first step. But then as you do more and more presentations, You may notice there's a part at the end of the presentation, that whole Q&A part. And so becoming a better presenter isn't only about the part that you expected it to be about, learning how to project, how to stand up straight, how to even involve other people when it's virtual, how to tell great stories. But it may very well start to be more and more about you starting to perfect the Q&A part, which might not have been part of your overall expectations at the beginning. So that might be the hardest part. In emotional intelligence, it might be, I'll just pause, questions, comments. In emotional intelligence, the hardest part may be being aware before the tension even builds. In doing better presentations, it might be preparing for what kind of techniques you'll use in the Q&A section, as well as the preparing for the actual presentation. And I have one more example for you. Most of us like to get good exercise. We feel better about our lives when we get good sleep, good exercise, when we drink enough water. We feel better about ourselves when we do these things that we know are healthy for us, when we take a moment to be mindful or meditate. So let's suppose, hypothetically, that you are a person who might want to either increase the intensity or how often you exercise. So in that case, exercise is your goal. And the hardest part might be one of a couple of things for you. It might be consistency, making sure you do it all the time. Or, and I found this one is mine, with exercise, giving myself challenge right at the edge of discomfort. So let's say I do a plank for 30 seconds. At the edge of discomfort would be 40 seconds for me. And then in a week, at the edge of discomfort might be 1 minute and 10 seconds. So again, my expectations are, I'm going to do exercise. Here's my entire routine. I'm excited about it. But I also know that the hardest part for me is doing that exercise, but constantly pushing a little harder. So with that, when I know that's the hardest part, how do I challenge myself with this part or with that part of exercise? Can I increase my plank? Can I increase the difficulty with which I do crunches? Of course you can. You definitely can. You can also find different workouts on YouTube and lots of places. But the hardest part becomes not doing the thing, but constantly finding your own challenge at the edge of your comfort zone. To summarize, you have seen my hardest part with the first finger on the A string. We have talked in business about the hardest part of being an emotionally intelligent leader, the hardest part of being a better presenter in business, and the hardest part of exercise, which might be different for you, but there's just something that may not have been on your radar when you first set out to take a project on, but then you realize, oh my gosh, there's more there, and I kind of like it, but it also a little bit scares me, but I kind of like it, but it's so much work. I have to tell you, this figuring out where that A is by ear, it is so much work for me. And I also know that I want to keep playing the cello, and I want to keep doing this and learning that and messing up on it until I'm getting it more and more. Thank you so much for joining us today for the hardest part.